appreciate it. As was said, like we are constantly looking for early stage companies. Like we, SOSV, IndieBio, which I'll go into a bit more detail in a moment about, so you understand the structure of where we're coming from. Like we are the largest and most active investors in early stage and seed life science companies. So that's kind of like the area that we work in, where we invest in very early stage companies and take them through seed to Series A and beyond. So the thing about IndieBio is that it follows on with its investment. So it's an accelerator, yes, but it follows on with the investment. And we'll go into some more detail about that as we go through. Like, you know, this is me, this is kind of like my background. I think it's been covered already. I have a PhD in molecular biology, always wanted to do startups coming out of university. Back in the day, there wasn't a huge amount of opportunities in the UK, so I very quickly went to the US. I was very fortunate to be taken on as one of the founding scientists at Vertex Pharmaceuticals, which did really well. It, you know, number of approved drugs that I was fortunate to be involved with, and had a great time at Vertex. You know, it raised a huge amount of money, you know, over $1 billion in financing. So that was a great experience to see a company grow. I was employee 10, I think, and I saw it grow all the way to somewhere south of 2,000 people. So it was a great experience. We had an IPO, so I got to see the whole kind of journey that a company can have from startup to you know, large multinational company, and very quickly, very rapidly as well, like the growth. Like it was, you know, over 18 years it took to get there, but it was, you know, that's a lot. Like it packed in there. I did another startup after that as well, Apro Therapeutics, slightly different. It was in the biological space compared to small molecule and pharma. I did that for a number of years, and then, you know, have done a lot of startups, mainly in the US. I was always kind of, you know, I'm kind of based in Boston, Massachusetts. So I was always kind of like in the startup, mainly pharma and kind of med tech area. That was kind of like my kind of area of expertise, starting up companies in that area. I got recruited back to the UK, as was said at the top, to be CEO of IKC, which was part of the government strategy around synthetic biology. The UK government made a sizable investment in synthetic biology, what must have been, I think, probably about 10 years ago. And on the back of that, they wanted to make sure that there was some commercialization that came out of that investment. And one of the roles of the IKC is to make sure that there is some commercialization that comes out of kind of the research that's going on that the government has invested in. I got recruited back to the US, came back to the US, got recruited by IndieBio as they set up IndieBio New York, and having a great time here. Just want to sort of give you a bit of background about IndieBio. As was said, like IndieBio is part of a number of accelerators. I don't know if people know this, but it's part of a VC fund. And this is one of the reasons that we can follow on with investment, is that we have this VC fund behind us. And they invest in a number of accelerators, and IndieBio is just one of them. There's a number of them. There's MOX, there's China Accelerator, HAX, FoodX, and Digital D-Lab. And they all work, those accelerators all work in set verticals. And the IndieBio one works within life sciences and synthetic biology, based in San Francisco and also based in New York, as was said. And we rely on the fund, and the SOSV has a large number of companies, has just, I think it's 800 million under management and over 1,000 companies that it's invested in. A number of them are unicorns. So it's a hugely successful kind of enterprise, SOSV, and very privileged to work for them as well. Just want to give you some view of what is done in these accelerators and where the focus that we have of companies that come into us. It's very much around de-risking on the product side of things, the business, and helping companies get funded. Okay, so that's how our business model works. We make investments in very early stage companies. We take an equity stake in those companies, and we work with the companies to de-risk, especially the technology aspect of whatever the product is, but also the business side of things, and try and get traction within both those areas so that we can increase the investment potential of the company. And then what we do also is we're training the founders and the other members of the company to be able to fundraise, which is a skill in itself. But the combination of these three things helps us create very successful companies. And this is the focus that we have on it. I think it's worthwhile just stopping for a minute and saying, what is innovation? And I always like this kind of equation that Bill Ollett talks about this a lot, who's at Sloan MIT, and he's kind of like, does a lot of entrepreneurship training. And he very succinctly put, innovation is the product of invention and commercialization. A lot of people say, I'm doing something innovative, but you're not really if you're not commercializing it. If this isn't being sold, if this isn't being utilized, if this doesn't have people that want it, then it's not innovation. It's just an invention that's just sitting in the lab or on the bench. It doesn't make the jump to innovation. And that's what we're always looking for, especially as investors. We're looking for innovation. The typical model that we have out there is that there's an idea that people come up with, people and teams come together, they look for space, they start going out for funds, and then they're off doing, working on whatever their product is going to be, and at the same time doing a certain amount of commercialization around that BD development. But often there's a disconnect between those two things in terms of often the technology that's being made, outpaces the commercialization. And that, I have to admit that I worked with one company that did this, where we basically built a platform, and we spent huge amounts of money building this platform. We got it all nice, and it was working, and it was great. And then we went looking for customers, and there was no customers there. And it was a real learning lesson that, technology can't get out in front of the commercialization side of things. The best case scenario is where they both come together at the same time. But really what realistically really helps is that the commercialization side of things goes ahead of the technology. Because often the technology, you can come up with a technology, and, as they say, it's kind of, a technology looking for a problem, okay? When it's much better to sort of, find a problem and then look for a technology solution to it. And also want to say, what is a startup? Okay, so, real understanding of what a startup is. And this, again, is another quote that I'm quoting from Steve Blank. Startup is a temporary organization, and that's very important. It's a temporary organization. You don't want to stay in startup mode for a long time, okay? It's temporary, okay? And it's an organization that comes together. It's designed to search for a scalable and reproducible business model. So scalable means it's going to have, it's not only just going to have impact, you're going to be able to sort of, sell it to a lot of people, okay? You don't want to be selling this to one or two people. You want to sell this to the world, okay? You don't want to go after a small problem. You want to go after a big problem. So your technology has to be able to scale. And you need a reproducible business model. This is like really important. And I think the other presenters that have come to you will talk about this need for customer discovery and a business model. I just want to dig a bit deeper into the idea behind a business model. And all the things I'm talking about now this is part of an accelerator program that you would go through, say if you came to IndieBio. This is the type of vernacular that we use, the type of questions that we confront you with. And I always think this is a really good way to explain about startups, okay? So imagine you're a startup, you raise money, okay? First day, you're out there As soon as you start the company, you're spending money, okay? So you start a company and then almost automatically you're spending money. So your cash reserves are going down from day one. And then the only thing that will change the trajectory of that, the only thing are customers, okay? And that's, so what that startup phase is doing, you're in search mode. You're searching for a reproducible, scalable business model, okay? You're not building a company yet. One of the problems we have with a lot of companies that come to us, early stage companies, is that they want to build, Genetech or something. They're not at that stage yet. They don't have customers. They don't have a product. They're not ready for that. They kind of, they want to hire a load of people. One of the YC kind of rules, YC is an accelerator, YC accelerators, an accelerator in the US, very famous one, has a set of rules. And one of its rules is if you don't have 10 or 100 customers, you don't have a company. You've got to have customers, okay? That's the night and day between success and failure. Startups fail. Typically, they don't fail because of the technology. They fail because they run out of money. They don't have the money to do it, okay? Very rarely is it the technology. If you've got enough money, you can make the technology work, okay? But if you don't have money, you can't do anything. So money is critical to this process. And you get money from customers and investors. And I think this is where the business model functions, okay, in this search mode. So when you're a startup, you need to be familiar with a business model. You need to have, and this kind of what I've just put up here is the business model canvas. And this is the heart of being able to build a business model. Not a business plan, like you're not ready for a business plan. You need to figure out what you're going to make, who you're going to make it to, and who you're going to sell it to. And you've got a number of guesses. Like if you look at the business model, like there's 9 elements to it. There's the value proposition, which is the central thing. You've got a customers over on the right-hand side, a customer segment, who you're going to sell it to. You've got customer relationships. That's the relationship that you're going to have between the company and the customers. The channels, that's how you're going to deliver it to the customers. Over on the left-hand side, it's all about the key activities. What are the key activities you need, the key resources, and the key partners? And underneath that is you have the revenue streams and the cost structure. Think of it in 2 halves. If you think of the right-hand side, okay, the value proposition, the customer relationships, and the customer segment, that's all about the value that you can bring. And on the other side, it's all about the costs. Okay, so what you're looking at is you're looking at a very crude way of looking about what it's going to cost you to make the product and how much value is there and how much money are you going to make out of it. Okay, so that's the way to think about it. But when you start a company, you've just got guesses about all this. You don't really know who your customers are. You don't really know how you're going to deliver it. You probably don't know who your key resources are that you need in place, what activities you need to do, who your key partners are for enabling you to sort of get this to the marketplace. So what a business model allows you to do is go in and start figuring out how you're going to deliver this. How's the company going to work? And I can hear you like, and again, like I have a scientific background, you go, well, what about my technology? My technology is, it's all about the technology. Unfortunately, it's not about the technology. Like your technology is just one of the many critical pieces necessary to build your company, okay? It's part of the value proposition. So, you can be really hot on the technology, and the technology is really important, but it's not the most important thing. And as scientists, that's really hard to sort of wrap your head around. That's kind of like, and I know, because I was, a lot of your ego is kind of like wrapped up in the what you can do, your skill set and what you've been able to do and your education and everything. But the technology is just one part of what the company is made of. And the truth is, customers don't care about your technology. Afraid not. Like you're the only person that cares about your technology. What customers care about is what the problem you're going to solve. That's what they care about. When I used to go to investors and trying to raise money for my companies, the first question they would ask is, who are your customers? Who are you selling this to? They didn't ask about the technology. They didn't ask about the IP. Eventually they asked about the technology, and they did a deep dive to understand where we were with the technology, and they would want to see our IP and everything. But the first question, who are your customers? Okay. So when we look at the value proposition, this is all about, what are you offering to them? What are you getting done for them? Who cares? Okay, so if you don't have something that people don't care about, like, it's a hobby. Okay, it's not going to be a company. If you're just doing it for yourself, like that's kind of a thing. Because like, this is so hard to do, building companies, doing startups. It is so hard to do. You don't want to do it as a hobby. Okay, it's too difficult. It's too stressful. Okay, you're doing this because you want to make a difference in the world. One of the companies that we invest in, we have kind of like this kind of like, it's fairly flippant, but we say we invest in companies that will affect 1 billion people or make $1 billion. Okay, that's kind of like the mindset that we have. You got to remember, we're a VC fund. Okay, we have shareholders, LPs that invest in us, and we've got to get a return on the money that they invest. Okay, so we're not a charity. We're not kind of like the government just giving money away. Like, we're here to make robust companies that can give a return to our shareholders. Okay, but we are adamant that the companies that we invest in have got to make a difference. Okay, like, we invest in human and planetary health. They're the big areas that we invest in. Human and planetary health. So obviously, human health therapeutics, all that side of things, but kind of planetary health is like big to us, like ag tech, sustainability, cultured food, biomaterials. That's the kind of like area that we work in. So that's the products and the value proposition that we bring with the companies that we invest in. The customer segments, you've got to understand who your customers are in detail. You've got to know who the customers are, and you've got to have, you can't just have one customer. Okay? It's not going to work. Okay, and that ability to have a value proposition and identify the customers, that's all about having good market fit. And often that's what all companies are looking for, good market fit, where the value proposition aligns with what the customer wants and is willing to pay for. Channels is an interesting one. So how do you actually physically get your product to the customer? Okay, and that could be, are you selling it retail? Are you selling it B2B, B2C? Is it internet? Is it like, how are you doing this? You've got to figure out how you're going to deliver it to. You've also got to establish your relationship with the customer. Okay, some companies have very good relationships with the customer, some don't. Like, if you think of like, companies like Apple, like they had like really good relationships with the customers. Like, people, buy into the Apple cult and kind of like, yeah, I've got to have my Mac. So, it's what's the relationship? And that's all about, gaining customers, keeping customers, and growing customers. Revenue streams, obviously important. Like, who's willing to pay for this? A lot of people will say, oh, I'd really like that. Or, yeah, that's cool. Like, that sounds really good. But, are they willing to put money behind that? That's the key thing, that you've got to find out if people are willing to pay for what you are going to give them. So if we start going on to the other side now, like we start thinking about the costs that are involved in delivering this value to the customer, you've got to figure out, what assets are essential for doing this. So, within a life science company, this could be IP, okay? Or it could be you're licensing something in from someone, okay? Key activities. So this could be, you've got to do scale up. So you've got to have some kind of access to scale up and fermentation facilities. There could be, a fill component there, or a polishing component for the protein side of things. You've got to figure out what other bits and pieces do you need. So who do you have to collaborate with? That's what it sometimes comes down to. And these can be partners. What are the key relationships that you need to have in place So these could be, you know, a CRO, a CMO, but you're going to need other partnerships to deliver the value to the customer. And that's all going to cost you something. Okay, so you've got to figure out what the cost is. So why do you need to know all this? Like, you know, why can't you just kind of stand up in front of investors and say, well, I've got a bright idea and, you know, No, an investor will want much more understanding of how this is going to be delivered. Okay, and this is the business model. Okay, with its 9 elements. And so when you get in front of investors, you don't want to be you don't want the investor knowing more about the business sector and the business model that you're going to employ than, like, you know, than he knows. Like if he knows more than you about the sector, that's bad. Okay, you've got to be the thought leader. You've got to be the person that understands this sector better than anybody else. Okay, because you are the one who's selling in this area, so you should know it better than everybody else. And what an accelerator will do is it will take you through this process. Okay, so that you can come up with a robust business model that will enable you to get in front of investors. And we use this business model to sort of almost kind of scale, you know, where the company is in terms of investment. Okay, so we look at, we use, and this is like, I'm going to talk about technology readiness levels in a minute, but this is investment readiness levels. And what we do is we use the data that comes from the business model to figure out, you know, where they are in the scheme of things. Is this just like someone has, you know, a bright idea, or is that, you know, someone done some due diligence around this and figured out, you know, competitive analysis, whether there's a market fit on here, you know, have they been able to create anything in terms of an early prototype, which again I'll talk about later. You know, is anybody signing up to buy this side of things? So all these things, the business model enables investors to figure out where you are on the investment readiness levels. And there is an analogous to the technology and readiness levels. And you can think of an accelerator program like IndieBio taking you through this process. And it will take you through the investment readiness level side of things, and it will also take you through the technology readiness levels side of things. So one of the kind of, you know, selling points of IndieBio and the other accelerators that SOSV has is that they all have lab space. So you have this ability to de-risk the technology, either by making a prototype or to generate data. And that's key. So when you come out of IndieBio, not only do you have the business side of things de-risked because you understand how you're going to deliver this and who you're going to deliver it to, how much you're going to get paid for it, how much it's going to cost you, what partners you need to enable you to deliver this. You figured out the business side of things and how you're going to commercialize it, but you've also figured out and de-risked the technology side of things. And that's critical to getting in front of investors, because they might not use these terms, but what they will be doing is they will have a tick box and they will be looking at these things of where the technology is in its readiness level. And by readiness level means, hey, it's ready to, you know, you're shipping to customers. That's what readiness level. So I think the top of the technology readiness level is kind of like it's launched, it's going out to customers. So, you know, when as a VC, so my other hat, though, I run kind of IndieBio New York, but the other side of it is I'm a partner at SOSV and I make investments in these early stage companies that come into us. And so, you know, what am I looking for? What do I look for as a VC? Well, you know, one, I see a huge number of companies. Okay, so we see an awful lot of companies. And what we look for is, first of all, we look at the team. Okay, and very important, I said team there. We will not invest in sole founders. Okay, will not. Okay, so if you're just one guy with an idea, forget it. Okay, we won't invest in you. You have to go and find co-founders. Okay, so why do we do that? Okay, well, we do that because we know that the investors on the other side of the accelerator, they won't invest in sole founders. Okay, so as you go up and you're trying to raise more money post accelerator, if you don't have, you know, a team with co-founders, you're going to have very, very difficult kind of raising money. And I know you're going to say, oh, but there's Joe over there, and he, he's a sole founder, and he's raised money and he started the company, and I don't care. Okay, if you're going to grow big and you're going to want, and the other thing I need to say is, like, life science companies, I don't care what you're doing, you're going to need a lot of money. Okay. Just get used to the idea. If you want to grow a big company, you're going to need lots of money. Okay, so you're going to have to go, like, we can take you so far, and we sign checks up to 10 million, but you're going to need a lot of money. Okay, if you want to get this product to market. Okay, so the team is really important. And we look, I think the one thing one of the reasons I work at IndieBio is, I have a great job. Okay, I do working with IndieBio, because I feel it's like, it's kind of like the barriers come down. It's kind of like democratized kind of entrepreneurship. In the past, like, it's a fairly rarefied group that could start up companies. If you look around and you see people that started up companies, it's basically done on mom and dad's money. Okay, or they've got some connection, or the head of department, or the prof, or something like that. It's not the real people that are kind of starting the companies. Okay, but that's because it's very difficult to get access to venture side of things. And what IndieBio does is give you an entree into that world. Okay, because we have the connections with the investor side of things. So by coming through IndieBio, we give you access to that world. So it's kind of, the folks that kind of join IndieBio, they're not heads of department. Okay, like, there's no prof coming in and starting an IndieBio company. These are generally kind of like postdocs. Typically, we do have very few. We do have some graduates as well that join it straight away. But typically, it's postdocs, PhDs that come and join us. Okay, so the team is kind of like a key thing. That's the key thing that we look. And the vision. Do they have the vision? Is it exciting? Do we get excited about it? Is it going to kind of make $1 billion? Is it going to touch a billion people? Is it big? Okay, we don't want to work on small stuff. We want to work on big stuff. Okay, again, because it's so difficult. Why work on small problems? I want to work on big problems. Is the product credible? Okay, and that is partly to the team as well. Like, we see, again, like, we see an awful lot of different types of companies, huge amount of deal flow that we see. And, but is it credible? Does it make sense? And is the market big? Okay, I've touched on that one before. And to what's the outcome? Okay, again, human and planetary health. Okay, is it good for the environment? Is it good for people? Is it good for health? Is it a good product? We don't want to be like, there's certain things that we won't work on. Okay, so we won't work on biological warfare or anything like that. Okay, and we won't work on we're very definitely the core group is very kind of committed to the sustainability side of things. Okay, so it's one of the reasons that we make investments in bioremediation and cultured protein side of things. So and then we look at what's the investment that we've got to put in here? What's the cost that we've got to do? We have a standard deal that we use, but it's kind of the investment that we have. And again, like, the accelerator program itself is 4 months long, but when we make an investment, this is kind of, if the company's successful, this is like a 5-year commitment for us with follow-on investment as well. Okay, so it's the initial cost is just like the first part of it, and then we follow on with investment. One of the big realizations that I had of kind of how the model worked is that the accelerator program is almost equivalent to VC due diligence. So we have a 4-month period with the companies where we really get to know the team, we get to know the product, we get to know the market really intimately, much better than you could do by just doing kind of the standard due diligence that VCs do. And by doing that, kind of getting that close to the companies at a very early stage, we can have an influence on them, and we can also very, very quickly gauge what their potential is as well. And what we do is from the standard deal, we will follow on, as I've said, we put the onus on the companies coming out of the accelerator to raise the money, but any money they raise, we will follow on with our investment to maintain our equity position. And we keep on investing with companies until we can't afford it anymore. And we're kind of like that either they have run out of steam or we've run out of steam. So we follow on with our investment. But just look at the different things that we have to go through here on the investment readiness levels. You know, again, foundation team in place, clear vision. That's all part of understanding, you know, what the business model would look like. Yeah, is it a market worth going after? Do you know there's a problem solution there? Have you validated it? And again, I think you've talked about customer discovery maybe in some of the earlier ones. Are there early, you know, is there an early minimum viable product around this? Have you some evidence, a prototype or an assay, or, you know, some data, some either in vivo or in vitro data that would get people excited, some early evangelists that would come in that would maybe buy it, a very early prototype of it? Can you make a high fidelity minimum viable product where you could bring in more evangelists into it? And again, kind of confirmation of the product market fit, again, with money. The key business metrics are validated. Again, that's going to be around revenue. That's costs and revenue, okay? And obviously, the higher you go up there, the more you're ready for investment. Sometimes you don't have to go all the way up. Sometimes you can just get, you know, an early MVP and you get some evangelists come in and there's some money on the table. You can see investors, like I had one company in the last cohort that we ran, you know, that was very much that. They had a very early beta version of what the final product's going to be, but because they had some traction with revenues, and it was only, you know, 2 customers, but it was enough to bring other investors in, and they did quite a nice raise right in the middle of the program. So they didn't even get to the end of the accelerator program. They were kind of like in the middle towards the end of the program, and they were already, investors were already coming at them. One of the things that we do within the accelerator program is that we are almost probably not from the first week, but after a couple of weeks, we start introducing the companies to investors. So the investor side of things is very important to us. Obviously, this is how we make our money. So we want to sort of get investors. So there'll be very early introductions to investors. So they will start interacting with the companies, and you start building a relationship with investors that are interested in you. Seem to have frozen at the moment. I'm not quite sure what's going on now. Not sure why I've frozen. I'll just come out. Okay, I'm going to go in and see if I can share my screen again. I don't know if there's been any questions.
Not yet. I think I'll call out if there are some that come through.
Okay. I'm not quite sure what's going on, why the... So just excuse me a few minutes. What I was going to go is I think I might have to reboot or something here. So where I'm going to go in a minute is I'm going to start, you know, showing you like some of the companies. So use some examples that we have. Okay, I'm back up now. So can you see that? Hoping you can see that.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So hopefully I'm going to be able to run through and catch up to where I am. But where I'm going with this is I'm going to start showing you some of the companies. Hopefully I'm back here. I can show you some of the companies that we've been working with. Yeah, so the other thing is about the investment readiness levels. I think this is a therapeutic version. So there's different business models for different kind of sectors. Okay, so if you're working on a therapeutic, there's one business model. If you're working on a drug delivery device or a med tech device, then there's a different business model. If you're working on like reagent space, again, there's a different business model, but that would be all what you would be doing in the accelerator program. You'd be figuring out with the teams that we have here, what is the best business model for you. And what is going on in our heads while we're doing this is we're looking at all these things and we're trying to work out what the risk reward is, okay, on the opportunity that we see. So whenever we kind of like see an early opportunity, we have like this kind of algorithm that goes on in our head, and we're kind of like figuring out, whether all these elements are understood well enough and de-risked enough, and what the risk reward is. And I think the great thing about IndieBio is that, it will take early risks, okay? Like, believe it or not, I'm actually told by the folks that I work for, take more risk, take more risk. That's kind of like the mantra that we have. So we do take very early companies. And what we're looking for is we're looking for traction, okay? But I'd say one thing that, accelerator is a really good word because that's what we want. We want this thing to move fast, okay? Because what we're looking for is traction. And that's what investors are looking for as well. They're looking for evidence that you can give the company a relatively small amount of money, relatively small. It's somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000, and they can do a lot with that money, okay? So what they're looking for is acceleration, okay? So you got to go fast, okay? You're not going fast, you won't do it. Okay, I just want to go through some of the companies that we've worked with. So SynBioUK was an interesting one. So this was a therapeutic company. They had a compound that would promote clotting, okay? And they came into us and they said, okay, the indication that we're going after is going to be, traumatic bleeding, gunshot wounds, traffic accidents, that kind of thing. And we had to say, when we looked at it and we looked at the business model, kind of what we were saying, like, that's too complicated, okay? Can we really do anything within 4 months? Maybe you need to look at another indication, okay? And they did look at another indication. They looked at Plavix Reversal. So that was that's like a big problem where people have uncontrolled bleeding because they're on Plavix treatment. And it's a 1 million people a year, and it's it's one of the Plavix is one of the biggest selling drugs in the US. So they need an antidote to it. They need something that will reverse it so that people don't bleed to death. And so we went after that. And what they were able to do, we have access to a vivarium here in New York. They were able to do animal studies in rats and come up with an animal model that was already developed around this kind of like bleeding event, and show that they could have Plavix reversal. And the data was absolutely perfect. And they've gone on and they've raised 2 million now from us and others, and they're going to go on and raise 10 million. And that will get them to, that'll be first in man, proof of principle, clinical trial, all for 10 million. So that's like cheapest chips. That's kind of like unbelievable that you could do that. So that's a company that just comes into the accelerator. They do have, the technology readiness level was fairly high. Obviously, they had a compound that had done some PK, PD, and some toxicology around it. Again, we firmed that out in the accelerator program. So they were more advanced than probably most, but just simply by moving that indication made a huge amount of difference. You wouldn't want to go into a clinical trial with traumatic bleeding. It is just too expensive, too difficult, too complicated. So what we did is we simplified it for them, okay? And we were able to do that because we were able to sort of challenge them on the ideas that they had coming in. They had one business model coming in, but what we're able to do is challenge them on their guesses and on their understanding of what the marketplace will do, and what is needed. And also we have incredible kind of adjunct kind of advisors and mentors, and they're used to seeing these kinds of things, and helping companies, because there is always a bit of a thing where companies want to go after the biggest thing to begin with. Okay, but what we typically do is, we have a vision of this big thing that we're going to go after. So like this compound that promotes clotting, like we have visions for it being used in traumatic bleeding. But to get traction, we go small to begin with, okay? So we're just going to do the Plavix Reversal, and then once we get a FDA approval, we'll expand the label into other things. And there's a whole load of kind of genetic diseases that need clotting accelerated. So that's kind of like one example that we have. Hallamine was also in.
Stephen.
Yep.
I think we have a couple of questions, if that's all right. Not too much of an interruption.
No.
So I think the first one's from Sam, if you want to unmute and ask away.
Yeah, sure. So you were making a reference there to going fast, and I wanted to kind of understand exactly. If you could dwell a bit more in the concept, like what do you mean by fast? How would it change by product, industry, time scale?
Okay. What do I mean by fast? By fast, I mean not slow. There is a tendency, there is university speed, isn't it? There's university time, and there's the rest of the time. Okay, so there's a certain speed that people work at, and it's got to be top speed. Okay, there is let's be frank about it. Like I don't think universities change that much. Okay, so there is a sense of urgency has got to be brought to companies. Every company that comes in, I'm not kind of picking on anybody individually. Like it's across the board. There's venture time, okay, which is a lot faster than anything else. And what we try and build is a cadence. It's kind of progress every week. Okay, and it's kind of we gotta have progress every week. So there is like an element of pushing. Okay, and I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's where I was going with. I do tend to get a bit frustrated with companies that they don't sense the urgency, that there's no urgency to it.
Can you put any example timelines, for example, for the drug you were discussing at the moment for clotting?
Okay, so they are probably going to get their raise early this year, and they will be in the clinic before the end of the year. They're on an accelerated path from the FDA because this is a clinical unmet need. But that's what we look for. So when the truth is when I saw that company, I saw that. Okay, I've done this enough times to kind of like see that okay, and it's something that pharma does as well. So it's kind of like pharma does this as well. They'll come in on one indication, like they'll have like a big indication, but they'll come in on a orphan indication or something like that, and then they'll get approval and then get kind of expand the label. Other companies do it as well, and it's all to sort of just kind of accelerate the thing. Like there is a software thing that people do where they do a lot of kind of consulting, and what they're doing is getting close to the customer, and there is a cadence to that, and what they're doing is speeding things up. The other thing that we do that companies hate, we're just in our second week of kind of doing what we do here, and some of the companies are saying, and they've got 4 months, they've got 4 to 6 months, okay, when they've got to do something. So that's not a lot of time. And they're saying, well, we're going to build out a lab, we're going to do this, and we're like, no, like you haven't got time. Like you can do that, but it'll cost you money. Why don't you use a CRO to do this? Okay, where they're ready to go like that. A good CRO. Again, we're constantly looking, how can we accelerate? Okay, so I think that's more of the mindset is that we're here to sort of make the product very quickly, get it in front of customers, find out if they want it, and move on. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, perfect.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we have actually quite a few. So I was wondering, Stephen, whether you think we should there's 4, so whether we should have 4 questions now or whether you want to continue and then save these for the end.
I think the questions would be more useful.
Okay, fantastic.
If you have questions, they're more useful. So
Riju, do you want to ask your questions?
Yeah, hi. It's a great talk so far. It's been very informative and engaging, most importantly. So thank you very much. So I had two questions. The first one was, what's the best way to find people who have skills that you need, but you may not necessarily have? Well, you need the skills to bring an idea to life. So essentially building the team. And unrelated to this, how do you differentiate yourself from other companies if you're trying to tackle a big or a large problem, but that's possibly saturated?
Okay, let's deal. Okay, so the first one was, how do you find people? Well, I think one of the great things about the UK, and maybe the event that we're talking about now, back in the day, when we used to meet in person and all that kind of stuff, which we will do again, I'm sure. There was opportunities to have that social mingling side of things. There are a lot of kind of entrepreneurial kind of networks in the UK. I think they do that. They do it quite well, I think, in terms of, obviously the IKC and SynBioUK that I used to work with, did that quite well, where it would bring, like-minded people together. And the idea was that we were trying to nucleate, you all want to start something up, but you just don't know what. So you kind of like got to find like-minded people, and, some of them will have different skill sets. Often when we were, I think you could be falling down if you're not inviting MBAs to some of these events as well. Maybe when we go back in person, you do need a rounded team. What we really like is, we like diversity, and I don't mean like race or anything like that. I mean just different people. Some of the best companies that I worked with were the most diverse. And, it was just like different people, it was kind of, there was a scientist, there was kind of like an MBA, there was kind of like a marketing guy, there was just that diversity created enough tension and kind of energy to propel the companies. And I always thought, diversity of thought is kind of like really good. So the meeting thing is, unfortunately in the environment we're in now, it's all on Zoom, but I still think that there are opportunities. There's a lot of, Reddit, Twitter, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of places you can interact when you get desperate. So, you can direct mail on Twitter. So if you see something on Twitter that is kind of, oh, that's kind of interesting, you can direct mail that person and say, hey, or you can go, hey, you can get on Reddit and you can change the world. So you can, there are forums, for entrepreneurs. Back in the day, there used to be a lot of hackathons and maker spaces. I know that there's kind of like a maker space at Imperial. So, you just got to kind of like find them. Like the people, they're out there, okay? There are people that have big ideas, big ambitions. I was talking to someone this morning that, he wanted to do startup, but he didn't know what to do. Like, and he was a brilliant scientist, had great skill sets. So, they're out there. You just have to find them. Okay. What was the other question? Can't remember what the other question was.
So it was unrelated, but how do you differentiate yourself from other companies if you're trying to tackle a big but possibly saturated problem?
We'll if we see something like, it's difficult, okay? So I'm not telling you it's not difficult. You've just got to bring a different version to it, okay? One of the great things that, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the demo days that SynBioUK does, but it does this great thing around storytelling, okay? So you just got to tell like a slightly different story, a more personal story, or a different vision, like we're all different, okay? So that is reflected in the kind of, what's driving you would be different, okay, than what would be driving me. So it's just finding that something that will differentiate. It doesn't have to be huge, but, it just has to be enough to differentiate your story from someone else's story. Okay.
Beautifully put. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Okay.
Fantastic. Stephen, we've got another 3 questions that keep coming in. So I'm not sure if you want to keep going through them.
Yeah. Let's just keep going.
Okay, fantastic. Tal, do you want to go next?
Sure, thanks. Thanks for the talk. I was just wondering, typically, how much